Alright everyone, it's time to talk about the battle of the political five armies. That's what's currently happening in the United States. This is U.S. news. This doesn't have to do with other countries. In most cases you have more than five mainline political parties in other parts of the world. In the U.S., of course, there are two big ones, but they contain the same spectrum of ideologies as any multi-party system in Europe. So in Europe you'll have a nation, there's 10 viable political parties that share power. In the U.S., you have that many ideologies and a broad umbrella underneath the two main parties. You have outside movements that have chosen to start their own political parties, of course, like libertarianism, the Green Party. They tend to be outside of the political spectrum, except on the local and state level. It's sort of how the U.S. political system works in a nutshell, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. I see a battle of five armies forming right now. Over the last few weeks, in the wake of Trump announcing his run, in the lead up to the 24 election. You have the Democratic Party core, the liberals, some of the Union Dems, although many of them have gone over to be MAGA at this point, so that's a shrinking component. The liberal types, they're led roughly by Biden, or the handlers behind Biden anyway. It's certainly not him as a person individually because he's out to lunch. It's certainly not Kamala. There's actually a schism within this overarching group, which is one of the larger ones, along with the GOP, sort of non-MAGA Republican types. Their schism is between Biden and Kamala, it seems. Jill Biden fucking hates Kamala Harris. You know it, I know it. The legacy media might not want to mention it. They never give one another really a kind word. There is a rivalry there. Jill Biden is old and white, and Kamala Harris is younger and black, and so that has started a schism because the Bidens, of course, are bigots. Kamala Harris is an entitlement bitch, and so they hate each other. So there's one group. Then there's the GOP. So they're led roughly by McConnell, to an extent by McCarthy. He tries to wiggle into that little line that blurs between MAGA and not MAGA Republican, more successfully than McConnell has, by the way. Generally run by McConnell, the donor structure of the party, and so forth. And they represent, old school, non-conservative conservatism, so post-Reagan conservatism. In order to try to combat Bill Clinton especially, they essentially took the globalism thing and ran with it. They took gun control up and said, well, it's okay if we have a little more gun control. And all we want to do is give corporations more money in hopes of getting more donations so that we can be reelected. That's the whole fucking grift. And they're having problems because then there are outsiders. That uniparty core with the DNC, RNC types is combated on both fronts. The Democrats have a problem with progressive movements. There are now open calls, despite she won re-election, she's got reasonably high in-party support. There are now calls to primary AOC coming from within the party. The leftoids are talking about primarying Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, etc., the so-called moderate Democrats of the neoliberal core. Meanwhile, that core is calling to primary like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, the Geek Squad, the formerly Gang of Four. They're trying to get them out. Why? Because the DNC's overall goal has been to promise things to leftoids. They swing way out to the left during primaries, make them promises, get nominated, move a little closer to the center, get elected, and then ignore all of their promises. By the way, this has been done by Republicans. We'll explain that dynamic in a moment. The problem is that now you have outside leftoid groups that have taken advantage of that free support from the DNC corporate money to gain quite a few House seats. They now have several dozen House seats that they control, the Progressive Caucus. They have several senators behind them, several governors. They now have political power. And they're making a boatload of problems for the Democratic Party because anytime Ilhan Omar speaks, blue state cities say yay. Literally everyone else in the country says nay. It's the vast supermajority of the population that are turned off by socialism. They are turned off by Cuba pandering. They are turned off by Bernie Sanders' free ice cream shtick. And he's old school. He's not as far left as some of the Geek Squad uprisers. He fucking took his honeymoon in the USSR behind the Iron Curtain, just to be clear. These people are commies and socialists. The problem is no independent voter supports them. And you drive turnout up among populists, sort of the MAGA types, maybe not the GOP. So that's another group. That's combating the left. Now the right is being combated by a group which is semi-schismed right now. First you have MAGA. This is represented by Trump and by people close to him. a number of content creators, activists, many members of the House of Representatives actually, several governors, and a huge state party apparatus. On the ground, MAGA is probably bigger than the GOP in some parts of the country. That's represented by Trump, who is running. They don't get along well with the GOP. The problem for the GOP is that a lot of those fucking evangelicals that they used to make all sorts of promises to, they're MAGA now because they were alienated by the uniparty system. They saw the writing on the wall and decided to support Trump. Now, Trump's not a religious man, but somehow he's got massive evangelical support on the same order as Ronald Reagan, who also didn't regularly go to church. It was very, very funny to see him give the excuse of, well, you've got to understand, I love Jesus and I love God, but if I go to church, somebody might get hurt. Somebody might get hurt because an assassin comes in and tries to kill me. I don't know how well I do the Gipper, but it's not as good as my Bernie Sanders impression, I think, but it's passable. Anyway, that's the MAGA core. There's also an offshoot of MAGA, which I don't know exactly what you'd refer to it to, and it is multipolar, by the way, at this point. The anti-MAGA, but not GOP sorts. On the one hand, you have sort of the Shapiro-ite DeSantis crowd, and it embraces some of the ideology of MAGA but doesn't like Trump. Then you have like the Fuentes, Milo, Kanye thing going on. I mean, I know it's a joke candidacy, but it's there and there's money behind it. There's people with reasonable audiences behind it. I think there's an attempt to make trouble, but it doesn't have any overlap with Shapiro. Right now they're in a feud together actually, which is amusing. It's trending on Twitter at the moment. These groups, they've solidified, it seems, not so much, I think, behind Kanye as like an anti-Trump candidate from, the far right or something, because that's all sorts of fucked up. I think that it's rather a re-embracing of like the meme lord 2016 thing. So it's sort of MAGA-minus-Trump, if you can term it that. So you've got MAGA as an outside for the GOP, and then you have the non-MAGA but still not GOP sort schismed into additionally two smaller poles, the ones that represent sort of MAGA light. They want DeSantis. Hey guys, we get it. We want to rankle the Jimmies and stuff, but Trump's unelectable and or he's just too old. So we're going to be driving with DeSantis now. Then you have this other core that says, no, fuck you, crazy meme time, rig up those Pepes. Doesn't seem to take it as seriously and therefore is more entertaining, and that's sort of like the Fuentes crowd at this point. So it's a battle of 5 armies, and one of those armies is fighting itself at the moment. So I suppose, I guess maybe they're the orcs, although I think that the neo-libs, like the DNC, would be the orcs. I think MAGA would be the Eagles, right? Yeah. where does Bilbo fit in here? I suppose he's an independent and apolitical. He's decided to stay at home. Who are the dwarves? Well, they're like greedy and mad for gold and stuff. That's the GOP. I think the GOP are the dwarves. Anyway, it's just insane. I'm liking this political spirit that we have. It is close to 2016 levels of energy right now. Now all we need is Trump to return to Twitter. Fucking do it, Big Don. That's about all. Peace out.